Hey Josh, I got the next video for you to kind of start the next unit off. So what the next unit I normally do is with graphics, and I don't really have a whole lot of like lecture slides or anything like that put together. Normally I just show this in class. So I'm just putting together this video. Hopefully it's only about 5 or 10 minutes. And so today, I think you're pretty much done with all the turtle graphics drawings. So I'll let you turn that in, and I can look at that. And then to start the next unit off, I just wanted to give you this brief video today to watch, and you can try a couple things on your own. And then I'll have an assignment for you tomorrow that you can work on. That's like a one-day thing, and then I'll probably have kind of like a longer-term project for you to work on for like the next 2 weeks up until spring break. And that's my plan for you. And as always, if things come up, I can you jump in and show you some different things. But I have two files posted into the folder on Schoology. So if you actually look into that here, there's two files, Draw and KeyPress Listener. So if you want to log in and to Schoology and download those and put them into an IntelliJ project or whatever you're using. I'm using Eclipse again, so I have them in my default package here. The Draw class is one that you won't need to really edit, but you can look through it. It's we're using Java Swing, I believe. Yeah, we're using Java Swing, which is one of their older graphics libraries for this. They now have JavaFX, which I can also help you learn that as well. And I have some projects in that, so we can learn that later on. If you're curious and you want to look through this code, you can feel free to look through it. But I wouldn't worry too much about looking through it. You just need this file to actually run the stuff. In the KeyPress example, I give you an example of how to use key presses. So this code, all it does is runs a really basic loop, and you can use the arrow keys to move this guy around, like and draw things that way. It just draws a little circle. So you can kind of look through that code as an example. I'm actually going to start with a fresh one here and a fresh class here. You want this to have a main. So I'm just going to show you a really simple one of how to draw some shapes. So I'm just going to call this drawing shapes. It will have a main, and we'll hit finish. So it'll look something like that. All right. Pull this off here so I can cheat off of it. All right. So the first thing you need is, so you'll need to have in your main is using this draw class. So there you can see all this different stuff that it has. There's a lot of different functions here. Window, it's very similar to in Pygame when we open up a window and we do width and height. Same idea here. So whatever your window size you want it to be, 1000 by 700 or whatever resolution you want, you can put it in there. You can set the title, very similar to how we did this in Pygame. Demo on drawing shapes. And then we can have basically our main loop. So we can create a Boolean variable called running, set it to true. And then we can say while running. Sorry, Python. I've been typing too much code in Python. And then we can have our loop here. So I like to, just like that we did for the FPS, I like to add like a slight pause here. Just for a slight delay, so 0.01 or 0.02. You could increase this or decrease this, and this will change how frequent the frames happen. So 0.01 is 100 frames per second. 0.02 would be would be 50 frames per second. So I believe so. Yeah, I think that math works out. So you can adjust that and play with it a little bit. Yeah, if you pause for 1/10 of a second, then in between frames, you're going to get 10 frames per second. So however you want to do that. there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with the draw class. So there's a bunch of shapes here we can see. So it does have mouse X, mouse Y. These functions will only work if you have already clicked in the window. So you want to be careful about using these. You'll see it gives an error, must click mouse in the window first. So there's a draw dot pause until mouse. And so once it will pause the simulation, and then you can call mouse X. So if I rerun this, I forget all of my Eclipse shortcut keys. It'll wait till I click, and then it'll record the X and Y, and we could print that out with that function. So if you wanted to, do something with mouse clicks, that's how you would do that. The key press example takes you through the key presses. So it's the same idea. You can get last key pressed, and it returns it as strings. You can use dot equals to compare what it is. So I have that code for you. What this library also allows us to do is it allows us to draw shapes. And so, for example, what we might want to do is we might want to draw an oval. And so, we could say, all right, I want to draw it in the middle of my screen, 500, 350. And what's my oval's width? 100. What's my oval's height? 20. And I can do something like set color. So if I want to make it red, or like a darker red, maybe just like a little bit of green, no blue. You have to set the color before you draw the shape, and then we can run this, and we'll see it. We get an oval here drawn out, and we can also set our fill as well to be true or false if we want the shape to be drawn in. All right, so I could draw like maybe a cylinder shape by taking this draw that draws like a shape and maybe just making a y variable starting at 25, or sorry, not 25. What's my y? 350, and then doing like a for in I equals 0, I less than let's say 100 pixels, I plus plus. And then taking these three lines and drawing this at y plus I, or something like that. And then you can see I'll get a little cylinder shape. The 3D graphics are kind of not great. Maybe we for the first one, maybe we could draw an outline so we kind of see that. So there's also a draw.set. Maybe there is no outline. Okay, so I have an idea for an outline then. We could maybe take this code, and right after we finish drawing them all, we could draw one back in the original position, just 350 with maybe the color of black. And so it'll draw all the shapes, but then have an outline of that top one, and maybe we'll set the fill to false, so it's just the outline of it. And so we can kind of draw like a three-dimensional shape there, which is kind of interesting. All right, so this code would be something that we could use to draw a cylinder maybe. And so maybe instead of, what if I want to draw another cylinder somewhere else? Then maybe what I want to do is actually create a cylinder class. And I'm going to have you do this for one of the projects. So I could create a class called cylinder. And what that code would look like, so I'm just going to basically steal this code that I put in here, and I'm going to move it into my cylinder class. Now, the class will need a constructor, so we'll create a constructor like we did with, actually, I don't know if we've done classes yet in Java. We did them in Python. So pretty similar. You'd name it the class name, public cylinder, and then your parameters go in here. So we would give it a x and a y coordinate, and maybe we could do it a color value, or we could give it an RGB list of colors for our RGB values, something like that. And then what we would do is we could say, all right, well, let's set. Oh yeah, and then in Java, when you're creating a class, you need to actually instantiate these variables outside. So we have to make these. You don't have to make them private, but you can. Int array of RGB. Why doesn't it like that? See for a second here. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So now we would say this dot x equals x, kind of like we did with self dot x equals x. This dot y equals y, and then this dot RGB equals RGB. And so now we've saved those values, and then we can just say, draw cylinder as a function, very similar to the way we set up our Python code. And here we could take this and put it in here, uncomment it, and here we don't have to reset y anymore. We have to give this a return type, so let's return void. And then maybe we also want actually a height of the rectangle or of the cylinder. So let's add that in as a field. And we'll add it in up here, and we'll add it here. So anytime you add an attribute or a field, you have to put it in 3 spots. Just it's one extra spot than you would in Python. Python, you just have to put it here and here. You also have to add it as a private field. And so here our for loop can go up to our height. And then our color we can set to RGB 0. We no longer have to use this anymore. If you don't use this, it will automatically know what variable you're talking to. Like it knows the scope of these variables are the class variables. So that's kind of nice. Set the fill to true, and then draw the oval. The x coordinate will be our x here. Our y coordinate will be y plus I. And then this will be our width of our cylinder. So maybe we can make this a width as well. And so maybe we can add in one more field here for the width. I know I did that in reverse order. Let me switch these. Hopefully this is making sense, but you can always ask me questions about this. And then, let's see. So then that would be our width. Our height's controlled here. This is just to give it like, this height is oval is to give it that 3D appearance. So 20 seemed to look pretty good, but if that doesn't look good, you might want to adjust that a little bit more, a little bit less. And then this one is our final one. So we want to keep the x the same, but the y is going to be the original y. And so just y, actually, you don't need this dot y. So we don't need to do y plus I, we can just do y. And then for our width, again, we'll use the width variable. All right, and so now we have a class that essentially will draw a cylinder. So in our main, now we can, instead of having to, say all that in one line here, we can just create the cylinder object. We can create cylinder C1 equals new cylinder with what fields do we need? X, Y, width, height, and the RGB. So we could say, X 300, Y 250, width of 50, height of 150, and then finally this is a little bit interesting when you're putting an array in. You can't just you have to use the curly brackets for an array. And so we can say new int and then our RGB values. So if we want a red one, it'd be 255, 0, 0. And I forgot the little square brackets there. So it's new int, and then these are my RGB values. And then, so let's say I wanted to create a second cylinder as well. I could call this C2, and maybe I can just switch this to have an X of maybe 600, so it's a little bit off to the right. Maybe a little bit further down the screen. Maybe a width that's wider. Let's try that, and maybe a height that's even taller. And then let's make this one blue. And now all I have to do in here is I just say C1 draw cylinder, C2 draw cylinder. And then I could actually probably make that function called draw or whatever. And then I run it, and you can see I get this cylinder here and I get this cylinder here. You could play with that a little bit, but it's a pretty basic class that lets us draw a kind of a cool 3D shape. So maybe just play around with this, try this on your own. Maybe you could try and draw a different 3D shape. Maybe like you could use triangles to try to make a pyramid or something like that. That's similar. And if you have any questions or anything, just let me know, and I'll be willing to answer them. So yeah, let me know. This video was like a little bit long, but hopefully this is good. And you can maybe actually, because this video took like 16 minutes, so maybe just watch this today, play around with it for a little bit, and then tomorrow I'll post an assignment for you. All right, I'll see you.